So it's Marxism with a Christian veneer, then.
That's right. If you attended any of the meeting of the base communities, Comunidades de Base in Latin America, of which there are 600,000 now, they trample on the cross. They say this castrates the people. Jesus was a revolutionary. He was killed because he was against the witch. And they use all the words about Jesus leading them, I am the way, the truth, and the life, take up the cross of war. This is Marxism.
They have turned the truth upside down, because one of Christ's basic messages was that his message and his kingdom was not of this world.
Of course, of course. But they have made it now, and that's why Paul VI made the error too in his own way, misguidedly, declaring that now we will work with man for a better world. But this is not the mission of the church. And that's where John Paul II has never erred. He knows exactly what salvation means. Now, it is very clever of Marxism because, as you know, what it did in Latin America is it penetrated Christian culture. And that is why, say, Nicaragua had the support of the Jesuits and Carmelites and Dominicans and Franciscans. And in Latin Central America, it is rare to find a priest who is not Marxized in his priesthood, in his so-called pastoral care. And while the Jesuits in Managua ran a school for Marxist tactics.
Let's take a look, though, at the situation here in the United States and in my country, in Canada. The bishops put out these statements from time to time on defense and economics. Are Marxists behind those statements? Because there seems to be a lot of left-wing terminology in these.
Marxization is. They have been Marxized. The essence of Marxism is this. Well, let's get quite clear between us. The essence of Marxism is this. Don't look beyond the human horizon. You, man, are capable of infinite perfectibility, providing that you get the capitalist jackals off your back. The people, they're the source of power. They're the source of perfection and of happiness. Don't look to anything transcendent. Everything is immanent to you. All your powers are there, but you've just been hindered by the rich and the oppressive capitalist lackings. That's the essence of Marxism. The rest of it, the workers' paradise, the proletarian revolution, those are all historical accretions which can be changed, as Gorbachev has, to other phraseology, to reasonableness and tolerance and lack of fanaticism. But the essence is, I want you to look at this world only. Don't expect salvation from on high. There's no message from beyond the stars. There's no salvation out there. Jesus is a man. We are men. That's the essence of Marxism. Now, the bishops in this country and in your country and in Europe, concentrating exclusively on sociological and political and military questions like nuclear disarmament, and on the environment, and on AIDS, and condoms, let me use that awful word, of which nobody knows the origin, and everything else, are purely and simply acting as social engineers. There is no pastoral care. There is, for instance, I read with horror the pastoral letter of Cardinal Mahoney of Los Angeles on the Blessed Eucharist. I assure you, it could be read by the Dalai Lama and accepted. It is totally and simply a sociological document. And apart from other blotches on Cardinal Mahoney's behavior, like absolving people from any obligation to go to Mass on Monday after Christmas Day, because they won't go anyway, he said. Some of us felt like writing to him and saying, listen, we want to commit adultery tomorrow. Would you please absolve us because we're going to do it anyway? This is not Catholicity. This is an immanent, this world attitude to make do with the social conditions that there are. Women want to be priests? Why not? They have their rights. I want to be a homosexual? Why not? It's your right. It's another lifestyle because it's all immanent. You can make it happen. This is the essence of Marxism. We have been penetrated.
Could it be then that the common thread that what has happened since the Second Vatican Council is that the Church has been secularized, that humanism has replaced Catholicity?
It has, but the key to that is just one person, one intelligence, Satan, Lucifer. He has successfully sold a bill of goods to the majority of Catholic bishops, namely that their job now is to align the Catholic people with the movement of peoples towards human perfection in a very interdependent society of nations. That is what they've been sold. And they will not do anything that violates that. And that's why you can safely describe our bench of bishops in this country, there are about 300 of them, as the religious arm of the left wing of the Democratic Party. It toes the line, right down the line.
And it seems that they're spineless, like on the issue of abortion and various other liberalizations that have occurred since the 1960s on divorce or what have you. They have been totally spineless in opposing those movements.
Totally. And the compromises they made were terribly embarrassing. Now, because, for instance, when Governor Cuomo of this state, New York, came out in favor of abortion funding, and he procures abortions by financing them, there was no condemnation. He's a public figure. Now, from the very beginning, you should have made it clear, anybody who votes for abortion funding, procures abortions, in other words, just as sure as the surgeon procures the abortion, or the wife who submits to abortion, or the husband who pays for it, anybody who does is excommunicated, can't receive the sacraments. He can go to Mass, or he or she can go to Mass, but until they confess it and repent in public, they can't receive the sacraments. That should have been applied holus bolus from the very beginning. It wasn't. So when Bishop Maher of San Diego excommunicated or declared that the candidate for election, I forget her name, Killaire or something like that in California, on account of her abortion behavior, or favoring of abortion, could not receive the sacraments, everybody howled at him. How dare you interfere with the political rights? From the very beginning they should have made it clear, this is not a question of political rights, this is religion, this is our stance. They didn't. They didn't. You know, one main failure there, this is the theme we should, I think, hit upon further, is this. When Jesus left us, visibly, he didn't give us armies, didn't promise empires. He promised we'd be hated, by the way. He promised the world would always be against us. But he said, you have one thing, you have a spiritual weapon, my grace. The one thing the bishops have not used is their spiritual weapon, the grace at their disposal. Let me give you an example. Recently here, in the last 4 weeks, St. Patrick's Cathedral was desecrated by the homosexual organizations. They invaded it, they interrupted the Mass, they broke the host into pieces and threw it on the ground. They were insulting, and they had placards which were blasphemous. Cardinal John O'Connor purified the church, canonically. But he never once decided to use the spiritual weapon of consecration to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. What he should have done, what many advised, was that he consecrate the homosexual community of New York to Our Lady of the Immaculate Heart, asking for grace they be converted. Because the only power we have is that grace. They haven't used that grace. They have not used that grace. They have not used the spiritual weapon. And therefore the spiritual weapon is lying dormant. And we are at 6s and 7s. We don't know what to think. We're just hurt. And we want to be Americans. And we want to be like everybody else. And we want to be at peace with everybody.
Catholics have joined the world, in other words.
That's right. That's right. That's the bill of goods for the soul. You've got to be part of it. Otherwise, why be fanatic? You're not American, you're not Canadian, you're not good citizens. You've got to be part of it. That's the bill of goods that's been sold by one archangelic intelligence. Now, when Lucia was speaking with Our Lady in one of her visions, there was a very poignant moment when Our Lady said to her, look, my child, don't be surprised if at a certain moment a certain diabolical disorientation affects the best of minds, a disequilibrium, so that they no longer judge according to the voice of my Son and of Peter. And you know, when you regard the way the bishops have acted, and the way priests act, and the way theologians act, and the way the best sometimes make awful errors, talking out of two sides of their mouth, you realize that there is a disorientation. They no longer know what it is to be Catholic. They no longer know, they no longer have the Catholic instinct. And why it's safe to say that we no longer have a Catholic people. What we have is this, we have one-on-one groups who are still Catholic. And amongst my associates in the United States and abroad, the first question we ask about anybody who looms up on the horizon for the first time with an appointment or a book or whatever, we say, is he Catholic? And we don't mean has he been baptized. We mean, is he still of the faith? Does he believe? Does he practice what he believes? Does he live it out? Does he say the rosary? Does he go to Mass? Does he go to confession? Does he uphold the Petrine authority? Because that is the crux, Petrine authority. That is the aim of the entire revolt of the bishops, to get rid of the Petrine authority. and it's almost got rid of in practice, as you know.
It looks like that there's really only pockets of Catholicism left throughout the world.
Just pockets, just pockets. And anybody who doesn't realize that by now has his head stuck in the sand. Because the church has now been blanketed. You see, it's very easy in the church. It's composed of an organization of dioceses and parishes. And the pipeline into that comes from Rome, through the bishop. The bishops have occupied all the choke points of that pipeline, and they have piped into it a new structure, the Novus Ordo, the RCIA, if you people in Canada have experienced the RCIA.
What is that?
That is the new way of Christian initiation. And if you read the manuals, baptism in another form, you'll find out that it's full of the most amazing amalgam of naturalism, environmental love, a bit of voodoo, some witchcraft, some Wicca, as we call it in this country, W-I-C-C-A, some Protestant traits, but absent is genuine Catholicism. And then we have, in addition to RCIA, we have a thing called Renew, which is a form of renewal, they call it. And it means chiefly that the idea of a priest offering the Mass is out, that the people now have the power, that they decide what prayers to say, and they decide what their approach to sin is. This has been piped into schools and parishes so that it has blanketed the Catholic Church in the United States and abroad, has changed people without them knowing they've been changed. They've been led by Pied Pipers out of the church. You know, if you went around England in 1530 and said to anybody, "Are you Catholic?" They said, "Of course I'm Catholic." By 1630, several men had worked on them. And if you went around in 1630 and said, "Are you Catholic?" They said, "Of course I am." But at that time, they no longer had Mass. They no longer had any obedience to the Pope. They no longer recited the credo we always recited. They no longer had the virtues. They were into Protestantism, but they did not know it. They were Anglicans. They no longer had valid priests. They no longer had valid sacraments, confession, baptism, holy orders, anointing of the sick. That was all gone, and they didn't know it. Similarly with the Mass of the Catholic people, they don't know. How could they know?
The institution is still there.
That's right. It's a grand illusion. We have cardinals and bishops and priests and nuns and convents and monasteries and printing presses and Catholic libraries and Catholic colleges and Catholic books. But it's an illusion.
So it's a facade.
It's a facade, behind which there is nothing that would be even permitted by past popes or the past churchmen. Wouldn't be permitted. Wouldn't be simply allowed. They'd kick you out of your ear.
Let's go back to Pope Pius XII on this point. Did he foresee that something like this was going to happen?
Yes, that's why he refused to have a general council. He refused anything like that, and why he was insistent on two or three things. No truck with Marxism. No even talking with Marxism. Utter separation and waiting and blocking them. And why he tried to set up an underground church in Russia itself. And he had 5 bishops and 7 apostolic administrators in Stalin's Russia until they were betrayed. A man came down once, said he was a Russian Orthodox, entered a Roman seminary, was trained, was ordained, and went back to Russia. He was a Russian spy, with all the names. And overnight, everything disappeared. They were all taken and killed. That liquidated Pius XII's attempt to have an underground in the Soviet Union. But that was one point he stressed, Marxism. Another point he stressed was Our Lady. He stressed this devotion of Lady. It finally became a sort of a joke amongst the bishops who were already losing their faith, that you couldn't get near him unless you were saying the Rosary. But by that time, the work of the devil had started, and devotion was diminishing.